Oh,
Yes.
okay. So
Yes.
thank you guys for inviting me here. I'm just going to speak to you briefly about what we've been doing, the work we've been doing over the last few months in Camden Healthwatch, and particularly focusing around reducing inequalities in health. So this is just a brief snapshot of what we've been up to, and then we can discuss later if you have any specific questions. If you can't hear me, do say, because obviously it's very difficult doing things remotely. So quickly moving on, over the last year or so, we've worked with voluntary community sector partners to gather insight on, particularly around COVID-19, as most of us were. And we heard from almost 1,900 residents. We almost doubled our website visits with around 42,000 page visits per page views, increased social media followers, and we try and make sure our content is as regular and as up to date and of the moment. We have a dedicated COVID-19 information page, and we've increased our social media. Voices, which is obviously the one of the most important elements of everyone's working, but particularly ours. So we've worked with trying to develop a better understanding of the experiences of 223 Black, Asian and minority ethnic residents. We've worked with children with special educational needs, refugee communities and young people, particularly on COVID-19. We've also done outreach of it via, although it was remotely. So I've actually worked with Camden Adult Education team to do remote information sessions on COVID-19 on the back of our webinars in mother tongue to some of their students over a period of time. And then responding to the pandemic. So we've tried to act as a barrier and as a bridge, not a barrier, as a bridge between residents and statutory bodies by organizing 4 online Q&A events attended by over 480 residents. And it was around, accessing GP services during the pandemic and hospitals. We've organized a webinar with people with autism on COVID-19 and vaccinations. So we've tried to be as open and transparent and as accessible as one possibly can be. I think similar experiences to everyone else here. Just a brief bullet points of what we think contributes to health inequalities, and I'm sure this is nothing new to you guys, but it helps to kind of revisit and reaffirm what we know exists. And the pandemic has firmly put it on the table for everybody. It was always there, but it's something that definitely can't be ignored now, which is, we know, poverty, unemployment, vulnerable housing, dangerous environments, discrimination in all walks of life, social isolation and lack of social support. And that is particular, although it affects everybody, but we found it echoing really within the older generation, older communities, as their loved ones have died or moved away, their friends have passed on. They really find isolation a huge problem. Poor social networks, and of course, the other great barrier in everything is digital exclusion. Although digital inclusion is fine for those who can access it and are confident in accessing it, there is a huge barrier for those who can't, for all sorts of reasons, whether it's disability, poverty, etc. So that is something that really needs to be addressed. And I hear again and again, our partners say, well, it's all on the website. Well, that's not good enough, because all on the website, not everyone can access those websites. So that's not good enough. People must have alternative ways of communicating and accessing. Just going to give you a bit of snapshot, an idea of what we're working on right now. And that is, we are doing a, sorry, that click to add title is still there because I was working on it even this morning. We are doing a study into long COVID, the effects of long COVID. So we are reaching out to partners and to the communities, residents as well, to talk to us if they have suffered from long COVID, or if they know of anyone who suffered from long COVID. And they don't have to be clinically diagnosed with long COVID. If they think they have suffered and they want to feed into the research, please do let us know, because it's still ongoing. It's on our website. And the whole premise of this, that the long COVID research will input into NCL, North Central London NHS service provision. Hopefully it will influence that. I'm also just finishing off a project on domestic violence during the pandemic, and we're literally, hopefully the report will be signed off next week, and when it does, I will share that with you. So that's it was a very qualitative deep dive into people's lives. The women self-selected to be part of our research, and it's actually quite mind-blowing. I won't say any more, but yes, that's something I think once it comes out, do take some time to read it and promote it. The other project that is ongoing now is accessible information. So we're working with Healthwatch England to look at, to capture the experiences of people who use interpreters to visit hospitals and doctors or any area of NHS, and their experiences of it. We're also interviewing service providers and their experience of working with people whose mother tongue is in English, and that the whole idea is that will inform the recommissioning of interpreting and translation services. So we're not the only health watch that's working. There's I think 6 other health watches that is working on this research across England, but because of our diversity and having a number of big, large hospitals in an area, we were chosen to be one of the organizations to work on this, should we wish. So we're working on that. Quickly moving on, where does Healthwatch Camden come in about putting values into actions? So we want to continue listening to the stories of those affected. We want to make sure that everyone's voices are captured. We want to identify challenges and barriers that impact experiences of health and social care for people in Camden, but particularly for BAME communities in Camden. And by doing that, we hope that we continue to influence change and improve services. It's also continuing to build trust and bridge gaps between all sectors, and valuing our local volunteers and partners. So what's the way forward? The way forward is really for us to continue tackling inequalities and influencing better health and social care outcomes for our local residents by continuing to understanding health and social care needs of local population, by continuing to provide a voice of local residents and those who are seldom heard, continuing to work with our partners, both in the NHS and our voluntary community sector partners, and also to continue participating in the implementation of the new health and wellbeing strategy and the development of the integrated care system, locally known as the Integrated Care Partnership. That's, I think, for the voluntary community sector, is going to be a key area of work that we must all, well, not all of us will be allowed to sit there, but organizations like VAC, like Healthwatch Camden, maybe Age UK Camden, we should all come together and work from the same, a shared agreed area of what we want to see as outcomes and how the VCS can influence commissioning, and certainly for the ICB to work with local communities on a continuous basis rather than a tick box exercise. So this is, I think, or we think at Healthwatch Camden, a great opportunity to do some joint care, joint work, forgive me. And then we're also at Healthwatch Camden looking at a new long-term strategy, which hopefully we should finalize by the first half or first quarter of next year. So that's me giving you a snapshot of what Healthwatch Camden, what we've been doing. I'm going to stop sharing and then you can ask me any questions you want.
Wanted to add, yes, if anybody has any questions for Shelley, we are encouraging people to post things in the chat as well, so that we can get back to people with queries if it's not answered here. And I also just wanted to say, Shelley, I've just gone on your website and I can see that your long COVID survey is still active. So the deadline for that, I believe, is the 10th of December. Is that right?
Yes, yes, it is. So there's still a while. So, you know, do please promote it. And
Yes.
as I say, it doesn't have to be clinically diagnosed. If anyone thinks they're suffering from effects of COVID, long-term effects, then they can go on, fill it in. It's a great, it should be a great piece of work that should, we hope, we will take it to NCL, and it should influence some service design and delivery.
Oh, brilliant. That's fantastic.
So it's not going nowhere. There is a purpose to it. We try, in all our work, we try and make sure that it actually goes to the appropriate bodies and there is some outcome.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Shelley. Thanks for your time today.
You're
and we did
welcome.
some great work during the pandemic with our vaccine hesitancy in our podcast. So thanks so much for your support with all of that. I'd like to just move on to our next speaker on the agenda, Joe Rinder, from who's going to be talking about the NCL CCG Equalities Fund. Are you here, Joe?
Yes, I'm here. Hopefully you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear. That's fantastic. Please go ahead. Thanks, Joe. Thanks for coming.
No worries at all. So I'll just introduce myself. I'm Joe Reader. I'm the new head of the ICP programme for Camden. This is the beginning of week 4, so bear with me. I'm still getting to know everyone and everyone that's involved, but it really actually is really brilliant. I know I'm obviously going to talk a bit about the Inequalities Fund and I've got a few minutes, but actually, Shelley, you made a really good point there. The voluntary community sector in Camden, I know already from early days, is really strong, and it's really important that we all work together as we take the borough-based programme forward. We all need to be working together. So I really see key to my role working with Simon Wheatley and others is actually at the moment understanding who my wider partners are, getting out to meet everybody, but I think there's actually a really rich basis to build on, but there's also a lot of work to do, Shelley. So certainly really looking forward to that. I've tried sharing my screen earlier, but I don't seem to be able to, so apologies that I don't have slides.
But I'll to make you host, Joe? We can do that. Yeah.
Is that how it works? I mean, you have to bear with me. I'm not particularly au fait with Zoom, but let me have a look and see, because it might help just to have a few slides about the Inequalities Fund. So do I just go to share screen? Sorry, everybody.
Yeah.
Right, let's try this. Can you see that?
Yes, we can. Fantastic.
Wonderful. So I won't go in the detail of everything, so I know I've only got a few minutes left, and I do talk a lot, but also I'm more than happy to come back and talk anytime about anything. So just a brief overview of the inequality scheme in NCL. There's already been a wave 1 of funding where we had 8 successful bids, and at the moment we're looking at the next round of funding. And if people haven't seen this presentation, I will share it more widely. But actually what's really important to see is that the aim of the NCL Inequalities Fund is really about innovation, collaboration, working together, really about those principles of integrated working in general, and really seeing if through this fund we can do things differently to tackle some long-standing inequalities. And in particular, if you see from this slide, you can see the breakdown across the boroughs of how the funding has been allocated. And it's really based on that sort of most deprived wards, really looking at actually that it's time to do things differently across. So that's the aim of the Inequalities Fund. And as you can see there, the allocation for Camden, and that represents the second half of 21-22 and then the forward 22-23. And the funding is broken down in 3 ways. So what you've just seen, that amount of money that I just described needs to align to our local priorities, planning guidance, what we want to achieve as an ICP. And this is really NCL as a system recognising that actually there are different inequalities in different boroughs in Camden and the different ICPs, in NCL, and that Camden's inequalities aren't necessarily the same as Barnet or Islington. But there is recognition that there are some priorities that are pan ICPs and across the whole of the NCL, And therefore, that's what we're calling our local priority programmes. So there's opportunities for programmes to join up across the ICPs and really work together and foster innovation across multiple areas. And there's also what they're calling a contingency fund. So an opportunity for bids that don't necessarily completely align to any of those areas, but there's still consideration for bids that come through to make sure that we can fund as much as possible, particularly if it really is focusing on our local priorities and addressing wider inequalities. And this is just to show you, I won't go through it in detail, but this is our evaluation criteria of how we score the bids that have come in. And so you can just see it's sort of weighted quite heavily towards our local priorities. And this is just an overview. And again, I've only really got a minute left, but this is an overview of the successful bids, the 8 successful bids from the first half of the financial year. And at the moment, actually this afternoon, we've got our local care partnership board where we're considering the 10 bids that have come forward so far from the second round of funding, which is due to go up to the NCL board by the 2nd of November. And the way that we're working with the existing bids is we are looking at highlight reporting and making sure that we're keeping an eye on mobilisation. But I also recognise if people are in this call are part of these initial projects that there have been some delays with funding. But now that I'm in post and that single point of contact, we'll be making sure that we address that as quickly as possible. So I recognise I've run through that really quickly with my 5-minute slot I had.
That's fantastic, Jo.
Hopefully what you can hear from this is that it's a fantastic scheme. It's relatively new, but actually I think it's a brilliant opportunity. It really shows that NCL are considering broader health inequalities as well as the individual things that are important in Camden. So I will stop sharing in case there are any questions for my quick run through.
Yes, does anyone have any questions for Jo? And what I'm thinking is, if you don't mind, Jo, can we have a copy of that? And then when we're putting this out on the VAC website, we can share those slides so people can look at stuff in more detail. Yes, Barrington. Yeah. Unmute.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Barrington Reeves. I'm the new funding and project manager from Health Start Camden in Islington. I've been in the post 3 weeks. I'm just thinking about, based on Shelley's conversation and what you've just shared, Jo, stuff around perinatal mental health for families and especially involving men, because in everything I've heard and seen, there's nothing about men and fathers. So I have a background in working with men and fathers, but as a Home Start manager, kind of looking at that whole early years send kind of remit, would a bid into Jo's funding pot be something that they would consider? Or because it's reducing health inequalities and it's kind of like dealing with inclusion and
certainly relevant,
diversity. So I'm just asking that question.
Yeah, and what I should have said, Barrington, and apologies, this isn't the only opportunity for funding going forward. This is at an pre-existing scheme really focusing on deprivation and inequalities, but it's not the only opportunity, it's the current one. But also as part of the wider ICP programme, there is what we call 5 focus areas. And again, maybe it's helpful if I share back that presentation so everybody can see that when I send through these slides. But there is a particular focus area on children and young people as part of our wider ICP programme. So I'm sure this will be sort of wider conversation. So if not for right now, there will be other opportunities.
Okay.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jo. Thank you so much, Barrington. Thank you for that question. And as I said, we'll share those slides. And Eve, maybe your contact details, Jo, just in case if people have any other questions.
Yep, absolutely. Yep, that's absolutely fine. I'm more than happy. Like I said, part of me starting in this role and getting to know everyone is actually having conversations, meeting with people and understanding what are our innovations in Camden, but also barriers. So yeah, I'll also share my contact details.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Jo. Thanks for being here today. I'd like to move on to our next speaker, Annabelle, who's with us. And so thank you so much. It's so nice to actually see real people. Please, Annabelle from Ageing Better in Camden. Thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to take this chance to cheekily promote an event where we are launching a research report that we have commissioned on a BAME-led partnership that we funded, that the lovely Chikwaba has been involved in. And what the project looked to do was to reach out, try and reach our funding into the micro communities and micro groups within Camden, because we realised that our initial funding, although it had quite a strong reach into the Bangladeshi community and some other communities, it wasn't reaching communities of African heritage. So we funded a multi-layered programme with a project manager, which was Chikwaba from African Health Forum, and then some much smaller groups below who we could then funnel our funding down to. And the research report that we've had has showed that it had a really positive impact for the older people who were reached. And almost all of those who spoke to our researchers said that they wouldn't have attended mainstream organisations or mainstream groups. They attended these activities because they were run by people from their own community, so they could build trust with those people. They felt that they could attend. They felt it was something that they could start doing. So those older people had seen a real value from that. And during COVID, for many of them, they felt it had been a real lifeline. But also we saw that the capacity within those micro organisations was also built and the partnership was pulled together. So you developed a stronger group of organisations who were representing those sort of micro communities. So the launch event is going to be on Zoom on the 11th of November at 1:30. I would really encourage anyone who's working in health inequalities in Camden, who's sort of thinking, how can we reach out to those smaller communities of African heritage? How can we work with them to come to that event? And it will give you an opportunity to hear about what we did and how it worked and where we didn't get it right. And hopefully that can be a model that we look to roll out beyond, we look to support beyond the end of the ABC funding, sort of at the end of December. Hopefully we can maybe share the details of the event. I know it's been on the VAC newsletter, but we could maybe reshare that. And if anyone's got any questions, I can also share my contact details. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you so much. Yes, what we'll do is we said 11th of November, 1:30. So yes, if you could forward us that link, we can definitely share that with the rest of the group. So gosh, that sounds really good.
I'll send you the Eventbrite link.
Yes, please send us the Eventbrite link, and anyone who was wondering, because there's still sort of plenty of time to log on. So thank you very much. Thanks, Annabelle.
Thank you.
I'm going to hand over to Chikwaba now. Just a few notes about what you've been up to, and this is the just here. Just an update on African Health Forum, the work that they've been doing since March 2020. So, hi Chikwaba, our trustee.
Yeah, so as mentioned, my name is Chikwaba. I'm the project lead on the Aging Better program, the BAME Aging Better program. Since 2020, we just started picking up with our projects, and then the pandemic happened. And as you can imagine, nobody was allowed to come out. Everybody was in their houses for a long time. So we sort of lost some of those connections, and some of the work we had done had been, disturbed. But we got bits of small pots of funding from Camden Council, the African AHPN, I don't know if you've heard of it, HIV Policy Network, and Camden Giving to provide work during the pandemic. So we had to stop doing face-to-face activities, and we're working online and through telephone and social media. And what came out of this, in particular with the COVID work, was a lot of barriers for people accessing, a lot of hesitancy as well on people accessing the vaccination. And these were due to faith. A lot of faith groups were encouraging people not to take the vaccine because they were saying, it's the 666, it's the end of the world kind of program, and that they could just pray and they will get better. And then there was a language barrier. A lot of people didn't understand what COVID was. They needed to be explained in their own languages. There was also cultural issues that prevented people from accessing the vaccine, but also conspiracy theories, which were going around and saying all sorts of things, which I think in general, people felt that the government had not addressed them. So people were listening to what was online and, you know, listening to what was going online and following that advice. So we think our work with that the council has funded has really helped, because we saw a shift from people who actually didn't want to take the vaccine and decided to take the vaccine. And some of the people had seen family and friends die from COVID, so they were quite scared. So where we are now, people are thinking, people who said no at the beginning are now rethinking about taking the vaccine. We've got a current program which is carrying on, which is funded by the CCG, the NHS, and that finishes in December. And we've gone back to people that we saw earlier, and they are thinking about taking the vaccine. But we've also got people that have taken the vaccine and have long COVID or have had complications because of COVID. And I was speaking to Shelley the other time, and we're going to provide her with a couple of people to do the interviews that she's going to be doing.
Thank you so much. Does anybody have any questions for Chikwaba? I mean, it was brilliant piece of work. I know that we did some work around vaccine hesitancy with, with GPs, and we did a podcast on it. And there was this huge thing about fake news and making sure that people have accurate information. And actually, I know when we met Chikwaba, numbers actually went up. So people who originally said no, they didn't want their, after you'd done that piece of work with them, the numbers got better, did they?
They did, maybe not entirely due to us, but I think we did have an impact.
Yeah, that was brilliant. I thought that was really good. And the fact that people have, you're coming from a position of distrust, and communities are coming from a position of distrust. And I think just acknowledging that was a huge thing. And then they were sort of more open to listen and open to receive sort of accurate information. So I know you have recently, Chikwaba, have changed the name of the organisation. So you're no longer African Health Forum, although online it's still African Health Forum, but
we have to change it. That's just due to capacity, really, for someone to help us change that. But yeah, so we've changed our name to Umoja simply because we wanted to register as a charity, and there's already another African Health Forum, so we had to change the name.
Okay, so we're going to do those updates online. So at the moment, it's still under African Health Forum, but the organisation is Umoja, UMOYA. We'll put all the links. JA, sorry, beg your pardon.
UMOJA.
And we'll put all those links in the when we send this out for the newsletter. We'll make sure we'll put all of that information in there, so you know. But you can still contact you in the same way.
Yeah. Now, no contact details will change. Obviously, the email will change in due course, but the telephone numbers will still be the same.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. Any questions for Chikwaba at this time? Or? Okay, fantastic.
No, I just wanted to say what a great piece of work. Really, so both by Age UK Camden and Chikwaba, so really glad to see and look forward to seeing more of these very in-depth projects that actually targets specific communities, because I do think there is still a need for that, and we must continue to do that. Otherwise, with a blanket approach, we will just kind of continue recreating where people just fall through the gaps. So I'm always very pro tailoring services and projects to meet very specific needs. So well done, and it's great I look forward to seeing it on the in November.
And I was thinking as well, there was a lot of feedback from people who said that they really found it helpful to have information in their own language and just to have someone speak to them. So that was a lot of feedback that I got. So thank you for that.
Yeah. Can I just mention one point as well?
Sure.
During this work, we found out that there was a lot of other issues highlighted in terms of domestic violence, and housing issues. So people have ongoing other issues going on, which we were highlighted when we were doing this work. And for our Aging Better program, we found that people went back to their old patterns, their health issues became worse. So, you know, there's more work to do when people, you know, start coming out as normal, as we used to do.
Yeah, and I think that there's already, I think some storms brewing around sort of the booster vaccine. I know I've had some feedback to me from communities who are saying that they're not going to do it. We've had enough. We don't want any more vaccines. So there's going to be some more work to do around sort of getting the booster shot as immunity wanes in the community. So yeah, but we'll be working closely with our partners with that for that. So thank you. Thanks, Chikwaba. I just wanted to just give a quick update to lead us on to our next piece. It was the BAME funding program, which was funded by Camden, and we did in collaboration with Ubele Initiative and an organisation called AWN. Unfortunately, either of those weren't able to be with us here today, but it was launched in March, small pot of funding that we had, and it was about sort of increasing funding capacity for organisations during COVID who felt that they were missing out on the larger pots of funding to the bigger organisations. So we did some work around that. Initially, the project was supposed to come to an end in March, but because we were in lockdown, we didn't get as many applications, so we had to extend that. And that work has come to an end in the summer. And I'm really happy that that we've got Karen Martins here, who was the original funder for that project, and she's going to talk to us a little bit about the further work that we're going to do. I mean, just to say, we actually had 12 organisations who had applied to the programme, all BAME organisations who applied to the programme, and they're doing a lot of ongoing work still. As we know, when you do this piece of work, it just doesn't just end, it sort of carries on. So they're still doing work with us. But Karen, are you here? Oh yes, I see Karen. Lovely to have you, Karen, here. I'd like to hand over to you just to talk a little bit about your unofficial progression fund. Thanks, Karen.
Oh, thanks, Diane. It's really great to see everyone. I'm glad that this forum's actually happening. We're working, as you know, with VAC, and we're throughout the sort of beginning of COVID, sort of around to the mid-COVID, we started, as the pandemic really took grip, we saw a lot of really small micro-organisations, grassroots organisations and groups, not only meeting the challenge, but going above and beyond. And as a result, they weren't as sort of as in a strong place, say some of the big players. And they also found that with all the work that they were doing on the front line as well, that their recognition and the work that they were demonstrating wasn't in any way being seen or acknowledged. And I think for a lot of small groups, they just think this is just what we do. We just get on with it and this is just what we do. And so the whole point of working with VAC and Ubele and AWN, the Always Network, was to try and bring some equity into that, to bring a sort of platform for those small groups. And the work that Always Network has been doing has been brilliant. They've been demonstrating things like working specifically on the timescale that works best with those small groups, as opposed to saying, right, we're going to do this workshop and we're going to run it at 5 o'clock on a Tuesday. They will actually tailor it to the needs and the capacity and what the strengths are of that small group. And the feedback that we got, and we're continuing to get in this work, has been highlighting to us how much support they need and how much recognition they need. So there is a small groups, what we're calling at this point a progression fund. It'll be known as the Resilience Fund, and it'll probably get known as something else, but it allows for really small micro Black and minority ethnic led groups to come in and apply for funding through first showing an expression of interest. And that expression of interest is simply to help them get over the line, because for a lot of small groups, they'll apply for funding and they'll think they won't necessarily put in a great application form, but they won't necessarily know how to put in an application form. So we want to support them and we want to help them identify other issues, whether that's through peer-to-peer support or any other demonstrating of support that they need to help them identify that through the expression of interest. It's not to trip them up, it's not to get them caught out in any way, because I want to put that out there, because I think for lots of small groups, they're very intimidated by bidding applications, especially with the bigger organizations who probably know how to do it in their sleep. It intimidates a lot of small organizations to even just put their names in the ring. So this is specifically set up for them so that we can help and support them and help them progress to where they want to get to at their next stage, or even just to continue running and to continue this being sustainable. So the funding itself doesn't come with a kind of caveat of you must produce a project. The funding can be used for whatever is needed by that organization. And it's really important to highlight that they might need it for core funding, they might need it for capacity building, they might need it to deliver a project, they might need it because they find themselves in a financial deficit because of just the sheer exhaustion and amount of work that they've had to deliver. But it's also about bringing those small groups together so that they can build a network and making them have a platform and a strength of their own. And future thinking, ideally to get them into the council, to have their voices heard, to have their consultancy, to have their platform, so that it's not a case of, we know you're out there, but we just don't engage with you. The whole point is to engage and to bring about real change. Because it's one thing to say that there's disproportionality and that there's, you know, discrimination, but real change has to also challenge that systemic view, has to challenge that systemic infrastructure, and it has to give those organizations the empowerment. So what I'm hoping is this is the start of something, not the outcome of a lot of research and this is what we're just going to land with, because there's a lot of learning and reflection to do. And while the opportunity and the willingness is there, whatever is the thinking or backing behind it, I'm fully open to frankly exploiting it. So if anybody's got any questions, please do feel free to ask me.
Yeah, we've got a question from Julia, who, sorry, Julia, do you want to take the floor? Go for it. Unmute.
Karen, that was fantastic. I'm very, very interested in, and Pascal Theatre Company is a Camden company and works very much with micro-organisations. The whole funding area you talk about, we can eat 6 months of our year trying to understand funding applications and changing the language for each one. We desperately are aware that we're in competition with huge organisations that have people just sitting in desks, working all year doing funding applications. So it would be very important for us to know how to access a way of speaking to people to help us reduce our own time, which to some extent we resent having to spend on funding when we could be spending it with groups who need our expertise. So please, any help would be most welcome. And how do we get to it?
Well, we'll be working with VAC to help put that funding out there once the programme has been formally finalised. So it won't be a case of, you know, like, oh, we're specifically putting a fund out there so that every other, it's specifically for marginalised micro-organisations. So we will specifically be coming to you rather than you feeling like you always have to put on the role of always having to come to us to find out what's going on. We want to make it as accessible to you as possible. So by all means, tell me how we can do that and how we can make that happen for you and for organisations, because we're open to that suggestion. I know that there's often a case of like the end of the financial year, there's this kind of funding dump where lots of organisations have this huge cash flow and they find that by the end of the financial year, they've got to get that money out there. And then it's like a feeding frenzy. And we want to focus basically on those small marginalised micro-organisations that are led and run by Black and minority ethnic that are working with micro-organisations working with Black and organised minority ethnic. I really get tongue-tied terminology all the time. But, you know, and it changes all the time, but it's about making it accessible. It's about working with you to make it accessible for you rather than us going, well, you've got to work with us. This is about empowering you. So it's about bringing that that floor to you and saying what works for you, rather than us saying we've got this thing and you've got to come and make it work to our criteria. I hope that answered your question, Julie. I did feel like I went on a bit of a rant there, so I do apologize.
No, I was just to add to Karen, just to add to that, what we're going to do at VAC is we're going to put together a kind of survey that will try and capture all of this, Karen. So all of these questions, because we're sort of in this infancy, we're trying to do all the learning, we're trying to gather. I actually had some questions sent to me from some of the supplementary schools that I'm working with, and some of the faith community groups that I'm working with. They've sent me a load of questions. So we're going to put together a survey, and that will be an opportunity for you to put all of your concerns in there. We'll make that available on the website. Hopefully, once that survey's out, it will capture at least some of the questions, some of the concerns, some of the barriers that people are facing when we're talking about accessing funding. So, but thank you for that, Julia. I see Shelley's got a hand up. Thank you, Shelley. Thank you, Julia. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Just a comment, I think, and great information there, guys. Absolutely agree. The smaller groups, as we all know, the macro level are hugely under-resourced and overworked, and they do need funding. But I find from when I talk to groups like that, sorry, I'll put my hand down in a minute, it is that, you know, the question is always from funders, well, we can't get smaller groups to actually apply. And it's looking at the steps why, and it's the whole application process is daunting. The whole monitoring process that then they have to sign up to is also daunting. So I would say that there needs to be, it's about growing your own and giving them the capacity and the expertise to do that. So on one level, provide that information and training that needs to be there. But on the other level, and I'm also calling out Joe here, sorry Joe, but when you do get to that stage of commissioning, look, because I know NHS monitoring and commissioning is absolutely layers and layers upon bureaucracy, but when you're looking to commission and work with voluntary community organization, is simplifying those steps. And I think these discussions need to be had earlier and open and honest. It's not about having a go at anybody or targeting anybody, but it is actually, you know, as my children would say, you know, you just don't talk the talk, but you have to walk the walk. So you literally have to put the steps there to see the delivery, and it's got to be a joint discussion on openness and desire to see change. So that's just a thought there. That's all. I shall put my hand down.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Shelley, you're 100% right. And I think, you know, this is what the BAME funding programme that we put forward definitely highlighted. It highlighted the fact that the will is there, the desire is there. They, you know, these groups want the support, but actually it's things like, for example, we were in a lockdown when we launched, and there was just such a huge focus on service delivery that they just didn't have the time to devote, all the staff to devote to attend meetings, to find out about what's going on. You know, I was dealing with organisations who had limited amounts of devices, and, you know, when they've got kids who are doing sort of online learning, they weren't able to even jump on meetings, to attend meetings, to find out information about what funding was available. So I'm hoping that we can capture all of this and try and put together, as Karen says, the kind of expressions of interest, and we can try and break down some of these concerns for some of our groups. Is there any more?
And also just looking at sorry, I'm jumping in here, very unprofessional, but also looking at innovative ways of commissioning. It doesn't have to be the same. You know, there's, if you don't push the button, how will you know where you're going to reach? So it's looking at different and diverse ways of commissioning to make sure it meets the needs.
And the point that you made about the monitoring process as well, that's something that's come back to me, you know, and the concerns around that. And I've had some concerns, I've had some groups talk to me about meeting the deadlines, just those constant deadlines. And if there's a possibility of those deadlines being extended, that they can probably get more information, but they're submitting sort of half-baked applications that probably wouldn't be as well thought out if they had more time, if they had somebody to, it was quoted to me as to check it over. So somebody to check it over. So when you've got English, it's not a first language, they're taking their applications to other people to check them. And if that person isn't available, then they're not able to get them in on time, and all kinds of things around deadlines and stuff. So, yeah.
I think it's also avenues where the funding is advertised, because we didn't hear about the first one until you spoke to me, and I don't think anybody on the Aging Better Partnership or the wider membership of Umoja heard about the Ubele funding.
Yeah, and I think that there was issues around, because we did targeted communications. We, fashion way of sort of printing out leaflets and sort of dropping it into people's doors might have possibly been more effective. I know, Shelley, you spoke about literacy, digital literacy and things like that. Those are all huge issues. So it's thinking about how we promote and get the information out there. So thank you very much. Thanks so much for that. As I said, I'm gonna put together that survey, and I just wanted to reference, I know back in March we had a forum meeting, and we talked about our objectives, what we wanted the network to achieve, and what we wanted it to do. And we're gonna get back to that. I'm really key that we had a really good attendance at that first meeting, where we captured all of those really good objectives of what we wanted the network to achieve, and we can't lose that. I just was wondering, if possible, I wanted to bring in my colleague Zubair to just sort of talk about his project, because I've got it in the back of my mind, Barrington's comment about male mental health, and doing some work around that, and how that will impact health inequalities. I mean, I don't know, Zubair, if you want to do a whole presentation, or if you just want to chat to us, talk to us.
And thank you for that. And the first thing I was going to say, welcome to Barrington, and also to Joe. Barrington, hopefully we can get together about men's mental health. It's a really big area, and it's a challenging area. And it's an area we've been trying to work around in terms of developing peer support groups around mental health with men, and Home Start. I'm very familiar with that organisation as well. And I think you were very new, I think 3 weeks. I think you've taken over from Ruth. So yeah, I've been working with Ruth as well in the past. So yeah, maybe we can touch base, and welcome to Joe as well. Okay, so yeah, I think I've got the graveyard slot right at the end, so it's fine, so just bear with me. Have we got my presentation? Shall I share, or shall I share?
Make you host.
You're gonna make me host? Okay, fine.
Yeah,
okay. And thank you very much. And thank you to Chikwaba and Shelley as well for their brilliant presentations, and everyone else. I work very closely with Chikwaba anyway, we know each other quite a number of years, so it's great. Okay, so let me see.
Would you like us to do it, Zubair?
Yeah, do it from your end if you can.
Okay, all right then. That's easier, we can do it, yeah.
Okay, there you go.
Just tell us when to change the slide.
Okay, all right. So so I work on, so my name is Zubair, and I've been working on the Culture Advocacy Project for the last 4 years, since 2018. It's a joint venture between Voluntary Action Camden and Mind in Camden. And basically the CAP works in partnership with community organisations and groups to co-produce group one-to-one peer support for those that are experiencing difficulties with their mental well-being and emotional health. So our main priority is mainly to break down barriers, challenge stigmas, raise cultural awareness across all communities in a sensitive and confidential manner. And that's what we did for the last 4 years. And we encourage organizations to develop and individuals to access activities that enhance social connections, reduce feelings of loneliness and isolation, and which supports their health and well-being. So we've been working in multiple settings over the years to support individuals in community centres, housing estates, in some of the most challenging housing estates in Camden, GP surgeries, schools, and basically making spaces where people can share ideas and thoughts and experiences, and also be in a space where they don't have to share, just be there and find some sort of friendship and listen to other people's experiences, then and slowly come out and talk about their own experiences as well. And the most important thing, the CAP contextualizes and profiles the learning of issues and situations that impact on mental well-being and feeds these into strategic decision-making bodies in the borough. Next slide. Next, sorry. Good.
The next one. Yeah, this is the next one, Zubair, not this one.
Oh, yeah, next. Oh, shall I go?
Okay, next one.
Okay, you need to do, I think. Change.
This one?
No, that's the next one.
Oh.
I think it's not moving at our end.
Oh,
Yeah.
I see. Okay.
Okay, yeah.
Go on, we're going to have one more time. Another go. Go on, go for it.
I can see only half of it.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yes, it's great. This is really CAP during the pandemic, the Cultural Advocacy Project. It's pretty much, I think Chikwaba and Shelley have really confirmed all the points that we've been seeing as well through the CAP groups, the peer support groups. So, but mainly, I think long before the COVID-19 pandemic and the murder of George Floyd, our peer support groups were highlighting inequalities and injustices that defined people's lives and their well-being. So it's not really a surprise for those of us that we work in the community sector all these years and colleagues. You know, it wasn't that much of a surprise that we're seeing evidence of disproportionate impact on our communities. So I think some of the points I think Shelley's already touched upon, which our groups were talking about even before the pandemic, and which had an impact, you know, during the pandemic, is overcrowded multi-generational housing. So, and what happened was that during the pandemic, we saw that the lack of space made it very difficult for certain families to isolate when they were found to be COVID positive. And also those families have underlying health problems, and especially older people were more at risk. One of the quotes that came through was that in one of the groups was that someone said, when my whole family was infected with COVID, my husband was fine. We asked him to leave the house and go away at his takeaway. He's 65 and we are worried for him. 3 weeks he stayed away from us. So this just shows an example of the things that people were going through. And these were people originating from BAME communities. We also saw, like other people have said, a rise in domestic control, dependency and violence as partners were spending more time at home. Other things, you know, I think poverty, you know, challenge on people's living standards and making ends meet. So we saw poverty linked to food, inability for the hike of price of fish and meat and other cultural necessities in some communities as the price went up. Children being at home added to strains on the family budget. They were home for much longer. Unemployment was a major issue as well that came through during our group sessions during the pandemic. Next slide. Sorry. Yeah, higher rates, just broaden it, sorry. Higher rates of school exclusion of young people from certain BAME communities, and as well as perceived preferential support structures. This was something that was something that we were talking about before the pandemic, and during the pandemic, we were seeing, you know, the impact on young people from BAME communities, the impact on their education. So they're already behind, and then they're falling even more behind. And also many of them were living in condensed environments with limited access to digital. And this last one I just want to pick up is that before the pandemic, we were seeing, and I think Chigwaba's group especially, and other groups are talking about, you know, lack of cultural awareness and sensitivity on the part of health professionals in respect to the mental health needs of BAME communities. So that being the backdrop, it wasn't really that surprising that we saw so much vaccine hesitancy from certain communities, and that was a barrier, and that continues to be a barrier, but it's one that we need to respect. You know, I think that's very important that we do respect people's views on these issues without going, you know, too far down the line of saying that you must take the vaccine. Yes, we do want to promote it, but I think you need to understand the cultural and historical context of their misgivings. I think if you just widen it, then the other bit I can just see it, sorry. There you go, yeah. And on a more positive note, during the pandemic, we ran online. The project also ran online workshops with specialist presenters, including health professionals, raising awareness of isolation and loneliness, COVID-19 myth busting, parenting skills, coping with bereavement, vaccine hesitancy and domestic issues. We also introduced online classes on arts and crafts. I think and this, I'm just going to leave you, I'm not going to talk too much about it, but there was a survey, an online survey that was done by Mind in England and Wales. And it showed that even then, in April, May, we were seeing evidence of BAME communities suffering disproportionately in terms of their mental well-being. And I'll pass on the slides through my colleague Diane, but it was there, systemic, racism and isolation and inequalities were there, and it's not going to go away anytime soon. And our groups highlight that in all the meetings that we have. They talk about the fact that the inequalities that they face, just by being from certain communities.
Thanks. Thank you so much there, Bear. Actually, what I think we'll do is if you don't mind, we'll share these slides as well, and then we'll put all the links to all these surveys in so people can check that, it's not the graveyard shift at all. I really wanted you to talk about this because
I think show the last slide. Show the last, if you can't do it. The last slide has got Chikwaba's organisation, one of the main organisations, original members of the Cultural Advocacy Project. So she was there right at the beginning. I think she was the first person I met, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think what's really important is that, I remember panicking because I used to come along and do sort of guest speaking on some of your groups, I know in some of the GP surgeries and stuff. And what was great was that those groups still continued during the pandemic and they still carried on online. So especially where we're looking to the winter months and we're probably looking at some kind of lockdown with restrictions, it's really good that these services can continue. So thank you so much to everybody who spoke today. And thank you. It's chairing my first meeting, and you guys went really easy on me. So thank you. And everyone who attended today, as I said, keep an eye. Make sure you're logged on to for our newsletter. It comes out on Fridays, and we've got all the information that's going to be on there. So thank you so much, and have a great day. Have a great week, guys. And hopefully we'll catch up soon. You'll be hearing from us soon. Take care. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. It's lovely.
Thank you.
Bye, Diane.
Thank you, guys. You guys are the best. Bye.
Bye, Diane. Well done.
Thanks, Karen. Thank you.